Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. Today's card uses the animation set by Stampin' Up! In the new catalog. I'm going to show you how this works here. It's just a slider and it's actually really easy to do. So I decorated the outside, and when you pull this up, the wings of the bird just flap up and down as it goes up. It's really a cool, amazing thing, and I couldn't believe how easy it was to do. So I'm going to show you how easy this is. Now, I didn't put a stopper at the end because I didn't want to complicate things, because it's really easy to go in and out, and if somebody pulls it out, they could just put it right back in. As I used this stamp set, I was really pleasantly surprised how versatile it is. So you have a butterfly and a bird, but it's also got flowers, it's got a little butterfly, some leaves, and some nice sentiments. And the die set has this piece right here, that's the animation part, but it's got dies for everything. It also has flower inserts, and this butterfly middle piece comes out. It cuts the antenna, and also there's a piece missing that was missing from my sheet. It's another smaller butterfly die that's really pretty. The animation slider is really easy to create. I have a piece of Stampin' Up! Cardstock 3 inches by 5.5, and I'm going to use my grid sheet to line this up. So I've already figured out that it needs to be 1.5 inches up. That's where the beak should be. So I'm going to line that up, and I'm going to use my grid sheet to make sure that I've got it centered left and right. So it looks like I need about 2 boxes on either side. And then another great thing about using this grid sheet is I also need to make sure that the lines and the stamp are perfectly horizontal for this to work exactly right. So back and forth, I'm going to make sure that those lines in my grid sheet match up with the lines in the stamp. So I'll put that on the lid, and I'm going to use some Rich Razzleberry ink, and I'm just using this one ink for both stamps. So I'll ink it up the first time and stamp it down on my paper here. And then for the second stamp, I'm going to use a Stampin' And the reason is because I want to make sure that this lines up exactly perfectly. So I'll prepare my plastic sheet, and then I'm going to get close up here so you can see how easy it is to line this up with the Stampin' sheet. I'm really focused on the eyes, but then I also have to look down at the tail to make sure that this stamp fits neatly in between all the stripes of the first one. So I'll put my handle in place, and I'm using the same ink, but I'm going to stamp off so I get a lighter color. And that's the nice thing about the Stampin' Up! Inks, is that when you stamp off, you get a muted version of the color, but it stamps very solid. So here, that's it. That's all you need to do this animation. So, so now that I've got that done, I'm going to work on the window piece. I'm going to measure the bottom for my die, which is 1 3/8 of an inch. And this is going to completely center my window in the middle of my cardstock. So what I'm going to do is use my MISTI, because I'm going to put my die right on that pencil mark I made, and then I'm going to insert my grid sheet underneath the top part. And that's because right along this right edge, it's going to make sure that these lines are perfectly straight. I want this window to be perfectly straight with those lines horizontal to make sure that my animation works exactly as it should. Now, I'm also making sure that my left and right side are centered, so I'm counting the boxes up. Now, once I get this in place, I'm going to take some surgical tape, and I'm going to put it against my clothing multiple times, because I'm going to really be mushing this tape into my cardstock when I run it through the Big Shot, because it's going to be really tight, and I don't want it to peel any of my cardstock up. So I'm going to make sure that I remove a bunch of stick from this tape before I put it down. I'll take that grid sheet off and put the other one on at the top. This is Soft Sky paper, by the way, by Stampin' Up! All right, so for my sandwich, I had to use a little bit of a different sandwich than I did the first time when I used crumb cake, because every paper is just a little bit different. So I'm going to use my base plate, the steel platform base plate, and then I'll put my cardstock right on there. You can see how scratched up my plates are. So to avoid getting those scratch marks on my cardstock, I'm going to insert a Mylar shim, which is nice and smooth, and then I'll put my acrylic plate on top. So the sandwich is really not that different. I'm just adding that extra Mylar shim. And then I'm going to peel this off. Now, like I said, it's going to really smush that tape in because it's a tight squeeze. So I'm just going to work on this carefully to make sure that I don't rip up any of the cardstock. And so I'm going to fast forward here. And I just took my time just to make sure that I didn't mess anything up. And if there's any residual glue on your cardstock, you can get one of those glue removers and just sort of rub it off. Now you can see that with this sandwich, the pieces just fall right out. And it's so delicate that you really want to make sure that you have enough pressure so these pieces do fall out and you don't have to pull at them. All right, I'm gonna put a piece of Scotch foam tape right at the bottom edge, and that's gonna stop my slider from going all the way through to the bottom. So I'm just gonna put it on here so you can see that the bird is sort of peeking up a little bit from the bottom. That's where the bird's gonna start. I have my Avery Elle Brights collection. I'm just gonna take a piece of yellow cardstock just to decorate my slider a little bit. I'm gonna mark 3/4 of an inch. You don't have to do this. And I realized I have grid marks already on my paper, so I really didn't have to do that. But I just wanna make sure that everything is straight across. So I'm gonna draw a guideline with my T-square right at that 3/4 inch mark. Now I'm making a lot of measurements here, but you really don't need to. You can sort of eyeball a lot of this, but I like to be exact, so that's why I do that. All right, so there's a half circle that comes with the die set, and I'm just gonna make sure that I have the left edge and the right edge right against that pencil line. I'm just gonna generally put it in the middle because my piece is extra long. So I'll run that through the Big Shot, and it really just cuts that curve. So I'm gonna have to trim off above and below the curve. So I have this Fiskars trimmer. It's a really inexpensive trimmer, and I use it for small pieces. And it has a wire that goes through where the blade is. I don't know if you can see that, but it makes it really easy for me to see exactly where my cutter is going to trim the paper, so I can get it exactly where I need it. So I'm gonna go from the top and the bottom just to meet the circle. And of course it's not gonna be exact, so I'll just take a scissor and just trim off whatever didn't get cut. I also wanna trim this piece widthwise, but it's kind of a long piece. So this is just an extra step here, and I just wanted to trim out the extra pieces at the end so I wouldn't have a long piece that I was trimming out in my trimmer. I probably could have skipped this part, but anyway, so I want to measure 3/8 of an inch about, and that's about how much yellow I want on my slider. So I'm gonna put it back in the trimmer and cut 3/8 of an inch down. Now, here is the slider, and I'm gonna need to fit this onto the top of the slider. What I'm going to do is take a T-square, and this is just for my own benefit so that I could see exactly where the top of my 5.5 inch card is, because I don't want my slider to go beyond the top of my card. So once I draw this line, I'll take my yellow strip, and I want the top of my slider to hit that guideline because that's the top of my card. So once I get that into place, I will take my curve again because I need to cut the slider with this top piece as well. And it'll fit right in the groove of the paper, so I know exactly where to cut it. And then I'll put some surgical tape in place, and then I can remove my yellow strip and run this piece through the Big Shot. And I'm gonna have to do the same trimming out that I did before with the yellow piece. And then I'm going to adhere the yellow to the top. So I kind of took a lot of steps to show you how to do this, but essentially I'm just creating a decorative top for my slider. So I'm going to put that in with some Tombow Mono multi-glue and cut the edges off. So now my slider is ready to go. I didn't want a white card base, I just wanted something a little subtle. So I have some Fog cardstock by Simon Says Stamp. And I need to cut off the top a little bit of this soft sky so that my pull tab will show through. And I cut off 5/8 of an inch. It wasn't enough. I wanted more of my yellow to show, so I went and cut another 1/8 of an inch off, so a total of 3/4. And now enough of my yellow is showing. Now I'm going to go ahead and secure my slider onto the card. And so I centered it and drew some lines so I would know how much space I needed for the slider to go up and down. So I'm going to put my Scotch foam tape just to the outside of those pencil marks, so that it gives it enough space to kind of wiggle around a little bit and move up and down. So I'll take the released backing off and I'll adhere this to my card base, which is just folded. It's a standard size A2 card. And now I'm going to work on the outside decorative pieces. This is Daffodil Delight ink on Stampin' Up! Cardstock. And this is Tangerine Tango. I'm going to stamp my little flower in this. And it's also got a center to the flower in this stamp set, so I'm going to add that to the middle of my small flower. There are matching dies to both of these, so I'll put those in place and cut them both out at the same time. Run that through the Big Shot. There's also a flower center that I can cut out, and I'm using the Tangerine Tango cardstock, which matches the ink. And I'll put some 2A glue on the back of it and put it in the middle. So I tie the color of these flowers together. And then to match the black of the other flower, I just added some dots with a Stampin' Up! Black marker to the middle of my yellow flower. There's another detailed die in the set. It's sort of like a bottom piece for the flower, and I'm going to cut it out of some wild wasabi paper. But because my flowers are different sizes, I'm going to take one of these and trim it out just to make it a miniature version so that I could put it underneath the small flower. It is tiny. You don't have to do this. In fact, you can leave this off the second flower if you wanted to, but I wanted them to kind of match. So I've got a big one and a small one now. It doesn't have to be perfect. So let's put some glue at the bottom of my flower, and I've got my green piece on some tweezers, and I'll just place it right there on the bottom and press it down. And then I did the same thing with the small one on my Tangerine Tango flower. There aren't any stem dies in the set, so I just decided to create a couple of quick ones on my own. So I cut a curve out of my Wild Wasabi cardstock, and then I just cut again right next to that curve so that I would just get a very thin piece of paper. And there's not much of the stem that's going to be showing, so it was no big deal. So next I'm going to stamp my sentiments with some Versamark ink on rich raspberry paper, and this is the same color as the ink that I did the animated bird with. And now I'm going to cut a banner. I just cut up the middle, and then I cut from the corners down to that middle, the bottom of the middle that I cut first. And so I'm just winging this here, which is very unlike me. I'm not making any pencil marks, but I did the same thing with the kindness one on the left-hand side. And then I'm going to stamp the inside of this butterfly. It's a really cool stamp. So you stamp the inside, and then the die cut cuts out the butterfly with the antenna. It's really pretty the way it works. Okay, so here is my animation. I'm going to put that in, and I'm going to add my pieces to the outside. So I'm just going to add some two-way glue to the bottom and to the right so it doesn't interfere with my screen. Press that down, and then I'm going to take my stem on some tweezers, just dot it with some two-way glue, and just put it right there coming out of the flower. And then I'll just flip it over and trim off the excess. Next, I'll just put my sentiments on. I've got two-way glue. One is going to come out of the left side, and then my kindness, I'm going to put some tape runner on that and have that come out from the right side. And I'll just trim off the excess. I always make it larger and then trim it off so I know it's perfect. And then I'll adhere my other flower with two-way glue, and then my other stem again with two-way glue, and then I'll trim off the bottom. And then one more thing is my butterfly, and I put the butterfly, I experimented with putting it in different spots around the card, but I decided right next to the flowers just seemed to be the nicest, most pleasing spot for it, so I put it right there above the flowers. I forgot during the video to punch a hole and add some twine to the top of my slider, so I did that afterward, and it shows up in the photos on the blog post. Okay, so again, here's how it works. You pull it up slowly, and notice that my flower was right where the beak was for the bird, so that it looked like it was getting some nectar, and now it's flying up, and now I'm going to put it back down. And as I get to the bottom, you'll see that's how, I forgot to mention, that's how I positioned that yellow flower, was to be right where the bird was. And that is the card for today. So I really enjoyed working with this set. I like it. I'm really glad I got it, even though it's a little pricey. I think there's a lot you can do with it. I'm going to do some other cards that are not animation, just so you can see what other things you can do. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.